All right. Hello, everybody. So this is a re-upload because once I uploaded the previous version, or not version, the previous recording, I realized how low my volume was. So hopefully this is a lot better. But anyways, we're back. The West is always the victim. Perpetual claims of victimhood while clearly being the aggressor. Okay, we're seeing this right now in real time. We see this all the time when it comes to imperialism. The imperialists, the colonialists paint themselves as the victim. And so they have to go on over to some far off lands to protect themselves. It's literally how it gets spun. All right. So I'll go through a few examples, and this is going to be a whole series, actually. This will be, there's so many examples that I'll just keep updating and put it all in a playlist. So it should be fun. So as you can see here, we have 75 years of brutal colonization. Then resistance to colonization is not illegal. Okay. So asserting your sovereignty and resisting against colonization and white supremacy. And then you have this guy runs to BBC, CNN, and is like, hey, I'm the victim. Look, they attacked me, right? And so we see this in so many conflicts in the Western world. The West hides its hand of its initial violence, reports on the retaliation and the response, and then paints itself as the victim for the whole world to see. This is the essence of white supremacist imperialism and their propaganda push to get people to believe in this framing. So let's go here. Washington Post. Chinese fighter jets buzz U.S. planes in dramatic new video. So the Pentagon released previous non-public videos and photos of more than a dozen maneuvers by Chinese fighter jets harassing unarmed U.S. reconnaissance planes patrolling lawfully in international airspace. By Ellen Nakashima, totally a U.S. AID paid stenographer, right? With a Japanese name, just to give it, some semblance of credibility. So then we got the Wall Street Journal. China's leaders are directing jet fighter harassment of U.S. aircraft, Pentagon says. So Washington cites hundreds of reckless maneuvers while Beijing says while Beijing says nations should mind their own business. That's a key point. All right, so we have two opposing claims here. We have the U.S. saying the Chinese fighters are buzzing us. They're attacking us. We're the victim. And then you have the Chinese saying, y'all need to go mind your own business. Why would that be the Chinese response? Let's look a little deeper into this. Okay. So we have Chinese jet fighters have performed reckless maneuvers close to American and other military aircraft almost 300 times in the past 2 years under a centrally directed campaign of coercion, the Pentagon says. So we have both sources. Well, this is the same Wall Street Journal article, so I shouldn't say both. But the source here is the Pentagon. Okay, so the Pentagon says it. They report it as fact. Okay. Now, let me point out one key thing here. The location. This is over the East China Sea and the South China Sea. Okay. Let's continue. Now, this is ABC News. Chinese jet carries out aggressive maneuver in front of U.S. military plane, officials say. Okay, so now we have Pentagon says, now we have officials say. All your journalism, quote unquote journalism, I'm using air quotes, you can't see me. All of it, they're just stenographers. Luis Martinez, Matt Saylor, the people whose names are on this article, just stenographers. They're just repeating what officials say. They have no idea if this shit really happened or not. So let's look. A Chinese J-16 fighter jet flew directly in front of an American surveillance plane flying in international airspace over the South China Sea last Friday, forcing the U.S. Air Force plane to fly through the fighter's wake turbulence and causing the U.S. aircraft to shake. I love how they try to get you to like have some type of sympathy for an inanimate object that costs like billions of dollars. Like, you know what I mean? So, all right, do you feel threatened? Are you ready to sign up for the U.S. military because a U.S. airplane, surveillance plane, flew through the turbulence and shook? So the question I want you to take away from this is, why is an American surveillance plane there? And could that have any reason to do with why China responded by, you need to mind your own business, when their jets flew close to a U.S. jet? So that, you know, according to the Pentagon, right? Why are you there? Why are your planes in the South China Sea surveilling things? Your country is all the way on the other side of the planet. So, yes, I think China would be annoyed that the U.S. is flying surveillance planes nearby their country in their airspace, irregardless if it's international airspace or waters or not. The U.S. would have a hissy fit if China was flying surveillance aircraft up and down the California coast in international waters, you know, far enough away from the U.S. coastline to be international waters. The U.S. would have a fit, but it's okay for the U.S. to do this and antagonize China and then paint itself as the victim. So let's look at something that most Americans have probably never seen in their lives. It's called a map. And in this map, we're going to look at how far U.S. sovereign territory is from China, the South China Sea, to be more specific. All right. So I'm going to set a node in the middle of the South China Sea, and I'm going to set a node. So as you can see here, you can see that's Alaska, and over here is Hawaii. There's a small little piece, the smaller island. You can't really see it, but let's calculate the distance. So from the middle of the South China Sea to, I think I put the point at Anchorage, that is 5,293 miles. If you drove a car nonstop at 80 miles per hour, it would take you 66 hours to get from Alaska to the South China Sea. So 2 days and 8 hours. Alternatively, if we drove nonstop at 80 miles per hour from Hawaii to the center of the South China Sea, it would take us 73 hours and 13 minutes to get there. So that calculates to 3 days and 41 minutes. So the U.S. is flying surveillance planes 5,850 miles away from Hawaii. Because what? Why are you there? And I have this question too when it comes to this next story. Check this out. U.S. identifies the 3 service members who were killed in drone strike in Jordan. This is January 29th, 2024. And, you know, may these 3 rest in peace. You know what I mean? 2 sisters, 1 brother. Brianna Alexandria Moffitt, William Jerome Rivers, and Kennedy Layden Sanders. All of them black. Why are they sitting up in Jordan, Northeast Jordan, I think they were, just being cannon fodder. So Lloyd Austin, defense secretary, this is the Biden administration. So he says, brave Americans were deployed in Northeast Jordan to work for the lasting defeat of ISIS. Okay, bro. The president and I will not tolerate attacks on American forces, and we will take all necessary actions to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests, he said in a statement. That's why they're there. That second paragraph right there. They're there to be attacked, to be cannon fodder, so the U.S. can say, hey, you attacked us, we're the victim. Now we get to deploy and then bomb you and steal your shit. Right? The bumbling empire that just finds itself in a war because it's just trying to protect itself. Funny how it always, that's always the framing, right? So, okay, here's a picture of Iran, and I'm counting on the western coast and the southern coast 21 military bases, and then on the eastern flank of Iran 20 U.S. military bases. Again, why are you there? They talk so much about Iran being the biggest threat in the Middle East, the bastion of terrorism. Also, Burkina Faso is the bastion of terrorism. Also, they give that moniker to whichever country they want to overthrow next, right? So, if Iran is such a threat, and why are you surrounding it? Why are you there? It almost seems like you're the threat and you have beef with them. It's just like, all right, I don't like you and I don't want nothing to do with you. So instead of keeping my distance and living my best life, I'm going to go to your house, build a little shack across the street and just sit there and use that as a base. But I'm not worried about you. What the hell is going on? The United States the propaganda is so far removed from the actions, right? It's just the way they move and what they say. There's such a gulf, right? So, anyways, I can't say this as well as Joseph Borrell, okay? So he gives the game away here. So this is on October 17th, 2022 at the EEAS conference in Belgium, okay? So at the time, Joseph Borrell was the vice president of the European Commission. And he gives away the game here. So listen to what he has to say.
It's a garden. We have built a garden. The rest of the world, and you know very well, Federica, is not exactly a garden. The rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, is a jungle. And the jungle could invade the garden. And the gardeners should take care of it. The jungle has a strong growth capacity, and the wall will never be high enough in order to protect the garden. The gardeners have to go to the jungle.
You can't be more blatantly racist and colonial than what he said right here. Europe is the garden. Really, he's talking about the Western world is the garden. The jungle, which has a strong growth capacity, will invade the garden. So the gardeners have to protect it because there is no wall that's big enough. So we have to go to the jungle. What does going to the jungle look like? I think it looks a lot like this. U.S. military bases all over the world in a military budget of world conquest proportions. This is the gardeners going to the jungle. Now, they don't want you in the jungle. I mean, in the garden. They want your resources, though. They want your labor value up there, though. Understand what he meant. So I want to play a game. And the game I want to play here is who are the victims? Who are the victims here? Who was the victim, Peter or Thomas Jefferson? Now you can see Peter had it very rough. But who was the victim, him or Thomas Jefferson? On April 16th, 1862, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act became law. Now pause for a minute to consider how much compensation would have been offered to the people who suffered torture and other human rights abuses and whose labor and families were stolen for generations. The answer is zero. The federal government compensated the owners of enslaved people for their loss of property. The people who were freed were not compensated, nor given any assistance for the transition to their freedom. Ooh, that's the cruelty of white supremacy, man. They are the victims in every situation. On this day in 1771, so January 18th, 1771, North Carolina approved payments of nearly 1,000 pounds, or the equivalent of $230,000 today, to reimburse white owners of enslaved black people executed by the state. And here's the actual article. A History of Racial Injustice, Equal Justice Initiative. Let's talk about Haiti. Now think about what happened here, right? So France is being urged to pay Haiti reparations. So the call comes from 20 NGOs who attended a UN rights forum on people of African descent in Geneva. France imposed harsh payments to recover lost income after a successful slave revolt turned Haiti into the world's first black republic in 1804. Weakened by an embargo enforced by French warships, Haiti agreed in 1825 to pay an independence debt of 150 million gold francs to compensate colonialists of their land and slaves. So can you think about that? France is like, we don't have access to your free labor anymore, so therefore you have to pay us. This is how neocolonialism works today with the IMF and the World Bank. Today. It's a gross injustice. Check out this video.
Here's where the first type of debt cycle begins. Let's look at Haiti, then known as Saint-Domingue, for example. In 1690...
Oops, sorry. Let's try that again.
Here's where the first type of debt cycle begins. Let's look at Haiti, then known as Saint-Domingue, for example. In 1697, France gained control of the western part of the island of Hispaniola and transformed it into the world's most profitable colony by brutally exploiting the unpaid labor of enslaved Africans. By the late 1700s, Haiti's approximately 8,000 plantations produced around 60% of Europe's coffee and about 40% of its sugar. Fast forward to 1804. Haiti had secured its independence through a slave rebellion that ended French rule. Now, you might expect France to initiate some sort of reckoning or reparations for over a century of theft and plunder of Haiti, because this was the revolutionary France that had overthrown and beheaded its own king and had proclaimed liberty, equality, and fraternity. But that's not what happened. Those principles did not apply to its slave colony. When France was finally pressured to decolonize, it did not leave Haiti with a fresh start. Instead, Haiti's independence came at a steep price, and that price was not just blood, but debt. Tons of it. In 1825, France agreed to recognize Haiti's independence only if it paid 150 million francs for the loss of enslaved people France considered to be property. This became known as the independence debt, which King Charles X demanded to be paid in 5 annual installments of 30 million francs. And Haiti had no other choice. It was under the threat of economic blockade, another military invasion, and the reinstitution of slavery. But how could this newly independent country with a fragile economy pay such a... It couldn't, and that was the objective. According to one record, that year's first installment was 6 times Haiti's income that year. But here's another catch. Haiti had to take out a loan from French banks to make the first reparations payment. This became known as Haiti's double debt, in which at one point as much as 80% of Haiti's revenue went towards paying. It crushed Haiti's economy, cementing the nation's path to poverty and pushing it deeper into the debt trap. Although France lowered the independence debt to 90 million francs and Haiti eventually paid off the double debt, a New York Times investigation revealed that Haiti still ended up paying more than what was stipulated, a total of 112 million francs, which amounts to $560 million today. But the exploitation didn't stop there. With pressure from Wall Street and what would become Citigroup in particular, the U.S. launched an operation to loot Haiti's gold reserves. In 1914, U.S. Marines seized $500,000 in gold from Haiti's National Bank, about $16 million in purchasing power today. It set the stage for the U.S. occupation of Haiti, which lasted 19 years. During this period, the U.S. further exacerbated the country's debt burden, forcing it to take on loans from Wall Street.
And this has really set the stage for a lack of development, a lack of resource for the needs of people in Haiti. And there are many in the country that draw direct lines between that colonial debt and the current socioeconomic status in Haiti right now, which is very low and has high levels of poverty and inequality and conflict.
As of 2021, Haiti's public debt totaled about $5 billion, or nearly 30% of its GDP, which brings us to the second wave of colonialism.
Completely savage, man. Savage. So, but this is the essence of Western hegemony and white supremacy, really. It's living off of the wealth and labor of the rest of the world. So let's look at some times where the West always starts the clock at a time where it can be the victim, right? So that's the only way you can get folks to buy into it, is you have to sell it by concealing that first aggression, right? November 4th, 1979, Iran U.S. Embassy hostage crisis. What they don't tell you about is what happened in 1953 to Mohammed Mossadegh, Operation Ajax. Who was that, Kermit Roosevelt? This, reading up on this, it sounds like a modern, what we call today as a color revolution, right? NED, USAID color revolution. The U.S. loves to talk about the hostage crisis in 1979, but they never give you the context that that revolution happened because the U.S. imposed the Shah on the people of Iran. You don't get that context. You don't get that history, because then they can't paint themselves as the victim. February 24th, 2022, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, they start the clock right on that specific date. They pretend the late 90s, they pretend 2014 never happened. A plan was conceived to use Ukraine as a battering ram to balkanize Russia. It is well documented. All the nonsense they're reporting on TV, it's just for the idiots who just don't look into anything and just repeat narratives, hook, line, and sinker. 2014, the Maidan Square incident, they frame it as a revolution. It's not what it looked like to me. And the whole world knows the truth about this conflict. That's why everybody's still trading with Russia, and people support Russia in this. And it's a shame what's happening to the people of Ukraine. We're going to do we're actually going to do a report on Ukraine as well. I need to get that out. October 7th, 2023. We don't even have the Hamas strike on Israel. We already know what's that. 1948. Come on, we already know what's up with that. Right? So, the West always starting the clock at a time where it can sell itself as being the victim. Right? And in order to do that, information has to be ahistorical, decontextualized, and you may never, ever be curious enough to look into things or do your own research ever. So yeah, guys, this has been The West is Always the Victim. Like I said, this is going to be a series. Oh, wait, the subtitle, Perpetual Claims of Victimhood While Clearly Being the Aggressor. So yeah, this is going to be a series. There's so much ammo. I mean, there's so many examples with Iran right now, right? But yeah, so hopefully it won't be so long until my next upload on this, because I'm going to try to be consistent with this. Every time something happens, I'm going to try to flag it and make, even if it's just a 2 or 3 minute video, I'll just like go over it and add it to the playlist. All right. The West is Always the Victim. Perpetual Claims of Victimhood While Clearly Being the Aggressor. All right, guys, have a good one. Like, share, subscribe. I'm going to try to be a lot more consistent this year. I fell off in February, but going to get back up on a horse. Anyways, guys, like, share, subscribe, comment, share, and until next time, peace.